Before we actually start, could we sit for 5 minutes together?
We could. Okay.
Thank you.
Shall I do a bell at 5 minutes?
Came out of a process that began in around 2002, and I was practicing at a Korean Buddhist temple, and they were having difficulty with the Heart Sutra. They put together a group of practitioners to make the Heart Sutra more chantable and more understandable. And as I began working on this, I realized the Heart Sutra was fine. It was our understanding that was lacking. But in terms of phrasing, in terms of making it understandable, I sought other translations. And so I went on Google and downloaded at least 100 different translations. Now, I photographed some translations, and you can see how different they were. It's almost as if they were speaking about several different ideas. And some of them were very old-fashioned, some of them were contemporary, many of them were tied up with a sense of thingness, of solidity. And that was something that was quite disturbing to me. Because the deeper I got into it, the deeper I experienced it, the deeper I just sat with it. Day after day, week after week, month after month, and then year after year. That sutra began to unfold in the way that you are reading it now. And so that's a process that began in 2003 and continued until probably 2 years ago. And in the commentary, it says that I started putting down notes because people were asking me, why was I changing it around so much? Why was I changing this, changing that? They were used to chanting a Heart Sutra, and they were familiar with it, and it was their Heart Sutra. And I realized, wait a second, many, many, many Heart Sutras, and we take possession of them. But the question for me was to make it my own, make it one's own, and to realize it, not to learn it, not to learn about it, but to realize the fundamental points that were being made. So I mentioned fundamental points, and I ask you, and I'm going to be doing this not as a lecture, but I'd like to do it as this open series of questions. And, you know, why is the Heart Sutra important? What does it say? And what is the value of the central point? What is the central point of the Heart Sutra? And that I asked, I'm not going to lecture on it. But that is the central point of the realization of the Buddha. What do you feel? Anybody who wants to respond, what you feel is the central point. Why is the Heart Sutra so important, so central in Buddhism? Why is it chanted? Anybody want to give that a shot? Yeah, Don.
One thing that came to mind listening to you, Luca, and my interpretation of this could be completely different in a week or 3 months, but what I was thinking, what came to me when I was listening to you was that the Heart Sutra reduces everything down to a central point, basically. It says, it's a window into everything, and it touches on why we practice. There is nothing to attain. But the thing that I realized listening to you was, isn't that the same thing with everything? When one person utters something and someone else hears it, they make it theirs, and it's their understanding, and that's why we have war. And so the Heart Sutra might have even been an accident at some point when it started, but I don't believe so. But it is a perfect example, or a near perfect example, of how everything could be interpreted. And it also begs the question, so why are we spending so much time on this? Let's go out and be it. Let's not talk about it too much or think about it too much. That's it. I'm done.
It's a good point, and what you said about war is central. All right, the Heart Sutra asks, what is real? All right, we go to war because what we believe is real to us. And the Heart Sutra questions that fundamentally. It even questions, since it's a Mahayana text, it even questions the Theravadas. The Abhidharma says everything doesn't exist, but the skandhas do exist. And the Heart Sutra says the skandhas don't exist. And as the Buddha said, they don't exist in the way that we normally understand it. And that is central. It's not that it does not exist. It doesn't exist in the way we understand it, because we understand ideas, concepts, and those ideas and concepts are realities to us. And it's on that basis that we are in conflict. So, your statement was abrupt, but I appreciate it.
And just to follow up with what Don was saying.
Could you louder, please?
Just to follow up with what Don was saying, it's for me at this point in my practice, the Heart Sutra is a way of remembering that there is nothing is separate. There is only the intimacy of all things, and nothing has a separate existence. Everything is arising. Oh, I don't know, I would say in Zazen it feels like breath by breath. Without being separate. So, and as Don said, it's this separateness, this the fundamental delusion that there's something here to protect or to defend that leads, at least in me, into feeling aggressive or dismissive. So something about, for me, the Heart Sutra at this point in my practice is something about nothing left out, everything included, something like that.
You're right on target. That interdependent co-arising, that causal process that is everything and has no anything in it, and we are part of it, and we are creating it as we go along. I didn't think I'd get into this as early as this, but that's central to all of the work that I've done in all of those years. So I'm really grateful to hear you say that, because that comes out of the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra is in negation, but underneath that is an awareness of, all right, there are no separate things, but then what is this process that's going on? So that absolutely is a key point. Let me, in that regard, what disappears? We were talking about separateness. What disappears in a realization?
Fantasy.
Sorry?
Fantasy, illusion,
Oh,
beliefs. Oh, I'm sorry, but who were you?
no, I just
Okay.
didn't hear what you said, so I was.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted to say that in answer to the original question you put out, having chanted the Heart Sutra for a long time, it's gotten beyond intellectual or ideas or even interdependent origination. And, you know, for a long time, I practiced a yoga, a devotional yoga with just focused on mantras.
Mm.
So when it says it's a mantra, I can relate to that because for me, it's become a mantra of joy. So instead of sounding like negations, it sounds like freedom to me. It sounds like removal of suffering, which is the third noble truth. And, you know, it has a cadence like a mantra, and it can permeate your bones like a mantra, and it goes to your heart like a mantra, the Heart Sutra. Right. So it's freedom. It's freedom from suffering, because suffering, you know, you're holding on to this, you're holding on to that. So if I'm coming to this with grief, for example, in my life, it can be letting go of this, letting go of grief, letting go of everything is really a joyful experience.
Yeah. And mantras are chanted throughout the world, not only in Buddhism.
Yeah.
And they are central to that inner harmony, that reverberation that is both your body and your mind.
In your heart.
Let me ask, Shoto was beginning to answer about what do we let go of and what do we cling to?
Yeah. But I didn't have a long answer. It's like, we let go of fantasies, illusions, delusions, things we think are true, things we think are solid. We let things be the way they are, which is like totally moving and interpenetrating and intercreating.
And that's that sense of letting go. Is there a thing that we let go of?
Well, there are no things to let go of, so that's a trick question.
I'm thinking of a more existential sense. Instead of letting go of ideas or concepts or dreams or wishes, what is the most fundamental existential sense that can be realized and let go of?
Your personal self.
self and selfness.
Yeah.
Self and selfness. That things actually are things, that they are an entity, that this is this and that is that. And in preparation for today, I've gone through a whole bunch of writings, and I keep on coming up with the same thing over and over again, that the Bodhisattva does not see an object, does not see a person, does not see a world, does not see or hear a sound, and yet responds to all of those. It's that process of not seeing things, not seeing realities, and yet not seeing realities, but not seeing and holding them as entities. Jamie?
My phone will kind of talk a little bit just for making a sound, so I do apologize on that.
Oh, okay. I just saw your name show up.
You know, in response to that query, Luca, my current experience and I only have experience that I can reference in Zazen, but my current experience is that there is a feeling of meanness.
Yeah.
But this feeling of meanness, I more and more experience as an event, as a happening, not a thinginess. Less thinginess and more eventiness. If that makes it. It's like it's just happening.
If it were a thing, would it be changing? Would it smile at one moment and not smile at another? It's like this thing has no stability to be a thing.
Yeah.
And that's the existential sense of I am this entity. That this table is this entity. This couch is this entity. And that is the central question in the Heart Sutra. It's our making of entities and the questioning of, is there truly an entity? And so that was my meditation for decades. All right, and that is what I brought to the Heart Sutra when I read it. And so I would read various versions of the Heart Sutra, and I would get a sense of solidity because they were translations. And some books have all the Japanese, Chinese, and so on all laid out together, and they have, following each word, numerous different meanings, iterations of what that word would be. And it's just like, wait a second, no. Go to the Heart Sutra. But they're translators, they're academics, and I'm just like, no. So for me as a practitioner, I don't speak Japanese, I don't speak Sanskrit. For me as a practitioner, it's just like, no. When I read a Heart Sutra and it has a sense of thingness to it, a sense of solidity, it's very painful.
So that's interesting to me. I mean, I've done that work of looking up the various words that translate a concept,
Yeah.
and have struggled to pick them. And basically it's like, I would want to use 3 of them, you know, not settle on one, because it felt like the richness of the thing was lost if I chose one English word for a fairly, I don't know, deep, fluid Japanese word. But but I wish, it's like I haven't seen that, and I would love to see it. Because I don't speak Japanese either. I've messed around with characters some, and what can I say? I really enjoy seeing that a certain character has these, it's multidimensional. Every character is multidimensional.
Yes.
And if you choose one word, you choose one dimension. And
Yes.
so you lose the others. And sometimes it's even a very odd meaning. It's like this word has some profound dharmic meaning, and that it also means a tree or something. And so it's
Right.
like, what does this have to do with that? And so that would be the question that I was doing, but I was doing this with the Genja koan. And I only did the first paragraph and a half. Because that took a year.
You know, that could be sufficient.
Well,
that
I
could
know.
well be.
So I have a question. I've heard today and read your seemingly common use of the word thing and thingness. So as I look at this Heart Sutra, well, I don't know how else to say it, but there are a whole lot of nouns on this page. Are those nouns the things we're talking about? Color, nose, tongue, sight, ignorant. Are those all things? What do you mean by things?
That's going to be central in the whole discussion. It will be throughout the commentary. It'll be throughout what I say. And it was one of Shoto's and my first sets of conversations. And I would say to her, what would I say to you, Shoto?
Don't make a thing. He got really tiresome. He was always saying, don't make a thing.
And the reason I said that is because Shoto would, you know, for whatever activity it was, she totally immersed herself in the reality of that activity. Horticulture or, you know, environmental practices.
Yeah, give an example, that will make it clearer. So pick one that you remember.
Well, I don't remember the term for it, but you know,
Something
it was
horticulture.
Yeah, and the solidity of holding something, as Don had said, the solidity of holding something is the source of war. And it's the idea. And so that was the point I was making. But it just became a mantra because I began to see it all over the place. I began to see it in myself. And I began to see it even in casual conversations with people in New York, or just sitting in the subway. I could hear the tones of conversation. And it was all about trying to convince the other person, the listener, of the validity and the solidity and the realness of the thing that they held in their minds as being real. And if the other person didn't go along with it, oftentimes there was energy, antagonism, difficulties, and louder voices. So making things is central. And when I say things, it is existential and it's global, but it's also the skandhas. And the skandhas are the process of our making things. You know, sight, perception, conception, and consciousness, that sense of self. So this is the process of making things. And the Heart Sutra goes into that and says, even that does not exist as an entity. But that was their debate with the Theravadins.
Right, and you mean even the process of making things is not a thing?
It's not a thing.
Yeah, okay, oh, and done.
As Brad was saying, it's part of an unfolding, but it has no inherent existence in and of itself. And that is central. And the question on, Barbara, on question on thingness is, can you find a thing other than something that has gone through that process of perception and creating a solidity in our minds? Is there a thing besides that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, no thing.
No thing. No hyphen thing.
No thing. Nothing.
Right.
Otherwise,
Even-
it was nothing.
Yeah, I'm glad you caught that, because even nothing, when I was meditating on how to phrase that word, and I said, nothing, wait a second, nothing is a thing. It's a thing of nothing. And it's like, wait a second, no thing. But it had to be hyphenated because it was still one concept.
Right, because it reminds me how people mistakenly think that Buddhism is about nothingness.
Yes.
So they're saying nothingness, they've made it a thing, of course, which is false in their view. But yeah, so everything is a thing. There's nothing that's not a thing.
In our minds. Because there are no things, but our minds through the skandhas create thingness. And it's our belief in thingness that is the great delusion. And that is the central core of the Heart Sutra. Did you all have a chance to go through the various versions of the Heart Sutra?
I think Don had something. I saw Don raise his hand. I was curious if Don had something.
Don?
Oh, yeah. This may seem tangential, but I was wondering when was it written relative? When was the original Heart Sutra, such as it is, written relative to the Theravadan period? Because it came later. But I was wondering when. What do we know about that?
I would suggest you take a look at Kaz Tanahashi's book, because there's a tremendous history in it, and discusses the various versions, because there are short versions, longer versions. The one we chant is a shorter version. There's the Tibetan one-letter version, and there's in 8,000 lines, and there's the oh, what's the name?
25,000 lines.
Yeah, so we're talking about the
This is
caution.
3,000 lines.
Yeah, and
Paramita.
exactly, and the Heart Sutra is a distillation of that.
So which book? Because I've got two of these.
Kaz Tanahashi.
What? Yeah, Tanahashi, yes, but
Okay. Thank
the
you.
whole book on
Yeah.
that, I don't
Yeah.
know that one.
So, but it came at some point after the Theravadins had developed somewhat. It didn't around.
The Buddha was 500
Yeah.
500 BC, and the Theravadins were, what if it is, about 200 BC. There were several hundred years
Okay.
in between, and there are actual studies on the evolution of the Theravada realization.
Right.
Oftentimes people will think of it as a philosophical development, but it's not. It's a deeper and deeper and deeper realization into what the Buddha had opened up to. He could only talk to his audience in a way that they could understand. I mean, the whole business of previous lives was fundamental to Hinduism. He wouldn't have gotten an audience if he'd say, well, guess what? This moment is the only thing that exists, and this moment itself does not exist. You try that with people who believe in previous lives, past lives,
Right.
etc. No. You won't get any place. So, the original, the Prajnaparamitas were a quintessential deep realization of the nature of thingness. And that's what the Buddha also had realized, but he had to articulate it in a way that was for his age, for his audience. And the Four Noble Truths, how could you start with the nature of existence if you don't have a foundation in where people live?
Mhm.
So he had to start where people lived. You know, the experience, the realized experience that things actually don't exist inherently doesn't make sense, but people's attachment to it does make sense. And so the Buddha said, there is a cause to your suffering. It's not that I had a bad mommy and a bad daddy and I got hit, you know, it's nothing like that. It is that we believe in the fundamental existence of existence. That process is what the Buddha had realized but needed to express in a different way. And he kept alluding to it. He kept, you know, in his actual teachings, in his actual words, he kept alluding to it, but he would not really speak about it, only in terms of, say, well, if there is this, then there is that. If there is not this, then there is not that. That's as simple an idea about causality as he could dare, given the audience. And also he spoke of the unborn and the oneness.
Mhm.
And many Hindu people were awakened as well and were speaking about the oneness, but he had gone beyond just the experience of the oneness and understood the implications. And his brilliance was to articulate those implications over so many years to his particular audience. But then Buddhism became established and temples became established and people began to meditate, but they also began to do studies. The Abhidharma began to analyze the structure of the Buddha's realization, and it became this whole thing in and of itself. But there were others there who were meditating, and there are ideas that the people who were doing the academics were sort of like the elites, but the unelites, the uneducated, were meditating on what they were being taught. And it's the meditation, the going into the stillness, the still awareness, when awakening occurs and the shattering of thingness happens. And that process, the Theravadins weren't doing, because they had understood the Buddha's teachings, and they were working with the Buddha's teachings. And remember that the Buddha had said, in 500 years or whatever it is, there will be an artificial Buddhism.
Mm.
And then there'll be a degenerate Buddhism. So any realization can be transmitted one individual to another. And we have our lineages of realization transmitted to realization, transmitted to realization. But if you have an academic structure, it begins to ossify.
That's partly why, thank you, Luca. That's partly why I asked for a historical context, because there's people in the world even now that have zeroed in on studying Theravada Buddhism way back when and gone to great lengths to try to understand that. And, you know, when you look at something in the period of time in history you look at, it has a lot of influence on your understanding. And then it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about how we all have these different understandings when we interpret something.
Yeah, and we take on those understandings because in part those understandings, as Brad said, we take on those understandings as ourselves. Who we are, what we believe, what we think, our identity. And it's those understandings that, as Don had said, as you had said, lead to war. So the evolution of the Prajnaparamitas are a profound study in a profound examination, study in hands-on, as Dogen says, that body-mind entry into the realization, the study that is realization.
Just a
Yeah.
thought that it comes to me in this moment, Luca, as we're talking about the evolution of the Prajnaparamita and arising as the kind of at the heart of the Mahayana.
Yeah.
And at the heart of that is the Bodhisattva. So there seems to be here in the Heart Sutra, and I know you talk about it in your commentary here in the Heart Sutra, there seems to be the link between the Bodhisattva and the realization of emptiness in a way that maybe, I don't know this is true, but maybe was intended to be a distinction from maybe the Theravada. I don't really know the history of this, but just that at the very heart of this, and I hadn't really seen this before sitting here right now in this same way, Bodhisattva, emptiness, somehow these are the same things or something. Not the same things, but
Yes.
flowing together somehow.
Yeah, because a bodhisattva is, we call ourselves bodhisattvas, and because we're we're Buddhists, so we're trying to do good, and we're excuse me, we're Mahayana practitioners, so that Mahayana is the bodhisattva. But the bodhisattva is an awakened individual, awakened being. And has anybody read the Avantamsaka?
The flower ornaments?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've read parts of it, never the whole thing.
When I got to know Shoto at a certain point, I started reading the she covers her eyes.
I had this old hand plane that had belonged to my father and I believe his father, and I had gotten it, and I asked him for help, cleaning it up and making it work again. I might have just asked him how to use it, but anyway, so we embarked on like a months-long project in which he had me get the most difficult equipment to get, whereas other people said, well, you could just do this. But no, I had to have this perfect flat surface. I finally used a mirror, which destroyed the mirror, of course. And so we sit on the stoop of my tiny apartment, which was a separate thing. And I was polishing away at stuff, rubbing, I don't know, the wood or the metal or whatever it was. And he was reading the, let's see now, Entry into the Inconceivable, the last chapter of the Avantamsaka. It was strange. I thought that I should have been focusing all my attention on the process, where the substances met each other, but he was reading this thing to me.
This sounds like a Oh, a familiar koan, I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Polishing the tile.
A what?
Polishing a tile.
Polishing the tile.
Polishing a tile.
Koan, polishing a tile.
Yes, Shoto and I go back.
Yeah. That was,
And that is a classic of our conversations.
yeah.
It was very sweet. Yeah. So the Avatamsaka is, they talk about it as being the first of the Buddha's teachings. But if you read the Theravadan texts, you will see that throughout those texts, the Buddha has a particular voice, a particular cadence, a particular feeling, a way of expressing. In all of the Mahayana, the Buddha, even though it's referring to the same Buddha supposedly, and this Buddha is talking, the tone is completely different. And so it comes to the point of what Buddha is being referred to. And I'm not answering that, and I don't really expect an answer, but you begin to see when thingness goes away and the interconnected totality begins to be palpable. You question the Buddha. Is the Buddha a thing, or is the quote Buddha a totality? Is it an expression of that realization? Because when the Buddha realized, enlightened, awakened to the nature of existence, he didn't see himself as being separate from existence. He and existence are the same. And that unfolding, that oneness, that non-thingness, that sense of being not a thing and not separate is, oftentimes referred to as the Nirmanakaya, the manifestation of the Buddha in the world. That process of awakening makes the Buddha the entire universe, not as a universe, but it makes the universe the Buddha. And we'll talk about that later, because I'm jumping ahead. So the question for me in asking you is you chant a Heart Sutra, but is there a definitive one? Do you think would be a definitive one?
Well, there are ones that we like better than others. For example, we really like, I think you'd say it's the Zen Center one. We love the Zen Center Heart Sutra. It feels comfortable, it feels fluid, it feels known, it feels whatever. So I don't think there's a definitive one, there's just your preference.
Or the
Right.
one you're used to, right?
Yeah.
And the one you're used to.
Yeah,
And
we're used to that one, so we like it. So
yeah, I completely agree with you. And this is the basis of thingness,
Yeah.
that we like it or we don't like it.
But that's okay.
Well, I'm not saying that it's okay, not okay. I'm just saying that is the question that the Heart Sutra asks us to examine. And so it's the examination of what is pointed to in the Heart Sutra. And so we feel comfortable with chanting a particular one. And that is our entry into the understanding. So that it's not that it's, one is better than the other. It's our entry. All right. The Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths. It was the people in his time's entry. So this process of finding a definitive one is, even the one that I've come up with is something that I'm just expressing. I'm just offering. And rather than trying to translate, I just wanted to express it and have it come out as something that was, each word, each phrase was an experience, came out of experience rather than understanding. And oftentimes I would have a particular word or a phrase or a comma, and it would be there for months or years. And then at a certain point I'd say, what's this doing here? Wait a second.
Recent of those is changing to no thing is entire and no thing is a part of, which does not flow as easily.
There's a lot that doesn't flow. There's a lot that doesn't flow.
Right. Anyway, so I challenged you about changing it, and you said, well, there actually is a meaning that's better here. And so I said, all right, I'll do it. We'll wait and see. There was something else that I had taken out.
Yeah, do.
This is a working Heart Sutra that might not look exactly the same at some unknown point in the future.
Yeah.
At this point, it's going to be pretty much the way it will be. And the reason I say that is because I started on this in 2002, 2003, with daily, weekly, and so on meditations on it. And it basically became a years-long obsession of going into it experientially. And so at this point, I have bought a house in upstate New York, and I've got so much stuff to do. And I've got a neighbor who's encroaching on my property line. And so, the idea of not making things, I have got to make things, and I may have to go to court, to make a thing. So
Where in upstate New York are you?
Near Woodstock.
Some little town that nobody ever heard of.
We've all heard of Woodstock.
Well, those are the best towns to be in, the ones nobody have ever.
They are, yeah. I mean, Woodstock is.
Yeah, I'm near Woodstock, and the town is called West Shokan.
Yeah.
It's not even Shokan, it's West Shokan. Yeah. I'm on next to the Catskill Park. I'm fourth house from the end of the road. There's a cliff that goes down to a stream on the other side of the road, so there's no houses. It's really quite exquisite. And it has a 160-year-old catalpa tree out front. Wow. And a 30 by 9 foot porch and lots of birds. And I'm just like, oh, wow.
Craving arises endlessly. Cling.
Yeah.
You're at clinging now.
Oh, well, I would say it's making demands. So the process of actually going into the words, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the focus. And also for the last 5, 6, 7 years, mainly what I've been working on is commentary. Because in the Heart Sutra, I'd gone into it, but then people started really asking me, why did I do this? And so it's in the commentary that's the justification for the phrasing.
Right.
And the way I write, and it's the bane of my existence because I am not a novelist, I write extremely succinctly. And so even the commentary is extremely succinct. So the Heart Sutra is 15, 18 years of meditation, and the commentary is a process that's been going on for the last 8. So it's pretty well done. I'm done. I'm just like so you know, Shoto has asked me, you know, because of people's were asking her, you know, to explain this, and I'm hugely, hugely grateful to all of you for being interested. This is my, you know, post-retirement life's offering. And as a Buddhist practitioner and one who has just found the enormity of the realizations in Buddhism to be so profound, that this is what I can offer. And this hopefully will be available and will be thought of after I'm gone. One wants to offer something to benefit people, and this is my offering. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was grateful
Thank you.
because, well, you asked me to teach an advanced class, and my life is pretty overwhelming. It's like, you know, I listen to you and the books you're studying, and I listen to Brad and sometimes Barbara too, and I go, I'm not studying. I'm not, you know. And so how can I offer something within the limitations of my life? And then I went, because Barbara said, well, what about the Heart Sutra? You know, why do you have this weird heart? You didn't say weird. Why do you have this alternative Heart Sutra? Yeah, I don't want to put that on you. You did not use that word. And I thought about it, and then I went, I can't explain that. And then I thought, Luca has wanted to teach. Maybe he would be willing. And he was willing.
The timing was just perfect.
Yeah.
I had gone through an evolution years ago. I didn't have an explanation. Years before that, I was struggling with all the various terms and the way I was phrasing it. And so at this point, I'm ready to express it. And you remember what the fifth ancestor said to Huineng. Like, don't teach for 16 years.
Right, yeah. Was it 16?
Right?
Remember, you told him to go hide and don't teach.
Don't teach. Don't teach, because that process of coming to really understand what you have realized will take time.
Mhm.
And you know, it does. And so just entering into this, going into the realizations that are offered, it really takes time, and very few people are interested in something that is half-baked. You know, so it's out of the oven.
Would you say that?
And
I was going to say, this is backing up to your saying I should study more or this or that. So we've known a lot of teachers. We've been with a lot of teachers.
Oh, right.
And your value is in who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Your presence of who you are, which I suppose one could say is a manifestation of practice or study, but it's probably more than that. And that's what counts. So this is why we appreciate you as our teacher, because you are a great example of passion, of humility, of kindness, all these virtues, you know, that are a big deal in Buddhism.
Yeah.
What are you laughing about?
They're a big deal.
They're a big deal. Yeah, so, you know, I want to say that. So, yeah, study's important, but what do you do with that as a person?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are some really nasty Zen teachers.
Good intellectual skills.
And that is what I saw in Shodo a long time ago. And, you know, even though we debated, you know, tooth and nail, but her devotion to this life and what she can offer, it's so let me ask, I use the term hands-on study, right? And I use the term hands-on in the way that I studied. But, so I ask, you know, what is fundamental to hands-on? And this goes to one of the koans. All right, the monk Fayan was going on a pilgrimage. Master Dejan said, "Where are you going?" Fayan answered, "On pilgrimage." Dejan asked, "Why?" Fayan said, "I don't know." Dejan said, "Not knowing is most intimate."
Yeah.
That's good, because I was going to say that's the right reason to go on pilgrimage. I mean, not knowing is most intimate, of course, is more deep, but
It's not knowing, and it is not knowing which is fundamental to study and fundamental to learning, and it's fundamental to these teachings, because these teachings are expressions of not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Except for a few that I have difficulty with, and interestingly, Dogen had difficulty with them, which sort of sound like shall we say, academic studies. But most of the deeply realized writings, including the Avantamsaka, are expressions of direct realization. And they didn't know. And so the process of Hensan for me was a process of not knowing. I would take a word or a phrase and have the multitude of meanings floating around in my head until at a certain point I didn't know what. I didn't have a solidity around it. And so, Brad, you mentioned in terms of sitting and meditating and that sense of losing that solidity, that was the process of entering into these phrasings. And out of that would come other phrasings. All right, how did this mean? How could I express this? And so going into was one process, and then coming out of was another process. So you go into it, and so all the meanings begin to fall apart, and then you come out of it, and out of your body, mind is that word, that phrase, that way of saying that expresses that visceral understanding, not intellectual understanding, visceral understanding. So the terms I used and the way I phrased it was visceral experiences, which oftentimes I would throw out eventually because I would keep going into it, keep going into it. If I felt satisfied, forget it. It was not something that I knew there was a problem with it if I felt satisfied. If I knew, right? So it was not knowing that was central to going into the Heart Sutra. And it was not knowing that brought words forth and phrases and italices and punctuations and all the weird little structures that are in there. So central to all of this, and I ask you in going through this, if you do chant it or if you do read it and you do look at it, understand that it is not something I know. it is something that has been expressed.
So, so words are things. And things are not fixed and things change. This is a devil advocate question? No, yeah. Anyway.
That's okay. We could use it.
So I think you know where I'm going. So
Go ahead.
by this logic, there would be no word that would remain fixed as of that or whatever experience, because words change. Things change. A word is a thing. It's no privileged over, you know, you look at decrepitude versus old age.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Old age, decrepitude. You know, I like old age, you like decrepitude. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
I'm not negating your words. I'm not negating your experience. I'm just saying that, like all things, words change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why the realization of the Heart Sutra is important. That's why the understanding of what underlies the Heart Sutra is vital. It's critical. It's, well, you can see I'm sort of ratcheting up because this was the feeling that I lived with. You know, that going into this was a vital experience. And so we chant our particular ones, and the person who wrote it or put it together is offering that, and we take it on and we learn from it. For me, it was to go into beyond words as things, and as I say, going into it and then coming out with phraseology that's totally flexible. All right, you know, this is just an offering. This is not a definitive thing. This is just my offering of this person's experience of the Heart Sutra.
And I think that really goes to, sorry, Shoto.
Go ahead. I can keep this.
No, go ahead, Shoto. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It was Brad. Well, I think we started simultaneously. Okay, so like a whole bunch of things are stirring around in me. One of them is some stuff that I learned studying the Samdhina Mochana with Reb Anderson that is relevant to that words as things, and then it leads someplace interesting with what you just said about the Heart Sutra and the words. But no, what was the other thing? So there's this thing now. What is it? It's a philosophy thing, and I'm connected with people who are really angry about this thing that's happening where words don't have their meanings anymore.
Is this Foucault?
What?
Foucault? You know Foucault.
I know Foucault.
Oh.
Am I thinking of that? Foucault?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
His name hasn't been mentioned, but I think he's in there. Postmodernism, something like that.
Yeah.
And so, like, one of the pieces, it comes up with trans people because it's like, well, what does the word woman mean? And it used to mean this, and they want it to mean that. And then we don't have a word for what it used to mean. And anyway, but below that, or the reason that's a problem is not about the human beings who, you know, want to name themselves something or other. It's about the loss of meaning in the language, and the name Donald Trump has been mentioned. And then just recently there was something about, about the beginning of fascism. Tim Snyder wrote this wonderful little book about lessons in tyranny. And one of the markers of fascism coming is that things don't mean anything anymore. If you read the book, or if you remember the book 1984, you see things not meaning, you know, it's like the meaning of a word will change from one day to the next.
Burning book.
And so that's an interesting question to me, because it mimics, you know, it mimics that thing of, oh, we don't know anything, nothing is permanent, nothing is fixed. It's a toxic mimic, but do you or does anybody know what to do with that?
Shoto, it goes into, we assume that a word has a real thing behind it.
Yes.
All right, that word has a real entity as its meaning. And this is the danger in Buddhism, where the misunderstanding is that nothing has any meaning because nothing exists. And so that very process of words changing, they're changing from this entity, this thing, to another thing. And so where is our orientation? This goes back to the skandhas in the sense of selfness. My ideas, my use of words, my use of language, my self-identity, all of these are being shifted around. But the key there, for at least in Buddhism, is the, in Buddhism, a tall grass is a tall grass. A short grass is a short grass. And what you're referring to is someone saying a tall grass is a short grass and a short grass is a tall grass. And so those are two very different approaches to linguistics and words.
Okay.
And so in Buddhism, the reality, the underlying reality is offering itself. And the underlying reality never lies. A tall grass is a tall grass. A short grass is a short grass. They never lie. Human beings will take and try and manipulate the minds, each other's minds. And this is the dangerous process that's being referred to in terms of the development of fascism. But I'd like not to go down that road, all right, because it's a whole different discussion on linguistics. All right.
I just wanted to make one point that I know deeply from my decades of practice within Christian mysticism and Jewish mysticism, which is that, and I think one way to think about what you're referring to, Luca, is the challenge of finding language for what is ultimately not reducible to language, because the thing behind the words is not there.
Right.
Right. So when the seer, the Upanishadic seer, or the Christian mystic, or the Jewish mystic, or the Muslim, the Sufi mystic is offering language because they are humans speaking to humans.
Yep.
And so they must find words, and so sometimes it becomes poetic language, all sorts of ways. But there is the fundamental understanding, the word is not the thing. There's no thing behind this word in the way you think that there's a thing behind this word.
Exactly, exactly. And that's what, when Barbara was asking her questions about, you know, that you have, say this word, you say that word, that's what I was alluding to, that the underlying fixed reality that we associate with the word does not exist. The underlying reality, our solidity of the meaning of the word is is what the Heart Sutra asks us to question and to look into. Because we, as the Buddha said, we create the world. All right, when he was talking about the 12 links, you know, the whole mass of suffering is created in our minds. It is how we use our minds, how we solidify experience, and how we solidify meaning of words. That is our minds, and our responsibility is to examine that. And that's the center of the Heart Sutra, is asking that simple question. Examine, as the Buddha said, examine your mind. Examine how the mind creates reality. There's the Four Noble Truths and the Heart Sutra. So you link them together. They're not just Theravada and then Mahayana. It's like, no, the realization is linked. The realization, those are expressions of the realization. They're different times, different expressions, different audiences, but it's the same realization that existence unfolds but has no solid reality. We create that reality, and we impose it on ourselves, and we impose it on others, and we create the whole mass of suffering through that process. And that's central. That's central. So, does anybody have the time?
It is 6:21 here.
Okay, we going till, what is it?
We're not going past 8 o'clock, but we didn't say we would necessarily go up to 8 o'clock because we didn't know how it was going to go.
All right, and I don't, but everything I've spoken about previously is kind of a preamble to the Heart Sutra itself. And so I have it here. And also I ask you to just do a comparison of the various ones that were sent. And, you know, we all have our favorites, but each of those is someone's favorite.
Right.
And so it's a process of like, all right, fine, let's go into it. And so I'm going to read the first verse. And by the way, you know, it's usually written out as a single text, not in verse form. And this is just one of the things that happened. It came out in verse form, but also it came out in these different concepts. As I was going through it, I realized each one of these verses addresses a unique situation or a unique concept. And so one links to the other, but if it's all written in one mass of words, we think of it as an entire thing. And it's very difficult to parse it out and see, wait a second, the first part is about the realization. All right, the second part is about the nature of emptiness. The third part is about thingness. The fourth part is about how the skandhas and how they aren't. And the fifth part is about the Buddha's teachings. And the sixth part is about what happens in realization. And the seventh part is when realization occurs profoundly, it comes profoundly out of this understanding, the realization of the Heart Sutra. So the Bodhisattvas, you know, the Heart Sutra is called the mother of Buddhas, Prajnaparamita, abiding in the non-thingness. I don't like the word emptiness. I try and avoid it, because emptiness becomes a thing, right? Abiding in non-thingness. And so that then the sixth part is what usually happens in many of these sutras, is a kind of a statement to the general populace of, you know, go out, read it, write it, publish it, talk about it, you know, all of that stuff. And I came to a sense of, wait a second, no, it's deeper, it's larger. The enormity of what is being offered, what is being realized, goes beyond just, folks, this is really important, go out and chant it. And so the last verse is in celebration. And so that's how it came out to be in those different verses. But you know, I'm a cabinet maker, so it's very important to understand it, like this piece is this side of the drawer, that piece is that side of the drawer. So, you know, it's very logical to me. It wasn't just a massive idea. It's just like, oh, wait a second, now we got to have the headboard over here, the legs over here, blah, blah, blah. So the Bodhisattva of compassion, Avalokiteshvara, while in awareness deep within the perfection of wisdom, clearly saw that all 5 roots of sentient experience are empty of inherent self-nature and realized the cessation of suffering and distress. That was the insight, all right, the direct realization. And the rest of it is an explanation of the realization. Oftentimes Dogen's first couple of paragraphs in any of his fascicles are like this first verse. It's just bingo, there it is. But the actual realization, all 5 roots of sentient experience are empty. The roots of our experience. Not just the things outside, but the very roots of our experience have no thingness to them. Doesn't mean they don't exist as a functioning unfolding, but they don't have a real entity to it. And the rest of it is explaining what that means. So I'm going through the commentary. On verse 1, do you have the commentary? Did you print it out?
Hold on. Nope.
We have it here.
Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, that's good.
Don, do you have it? Jamie, do you have it?
I can get it
Yep,
on my
I
phone.
have it on another tab.
Okie dokie.
What's the title of the commentary?
Explanations.
Explanation. Heart Sutra explanation. There we go.
Yep.
Right now, to the Zoom meeting, share screen, and there it is.
All right. Shoto, as I mentioned to you, oh, cool. Oh, good. It's let's see. So doing. Interesting. Good. All right, because the version you sent to me last night lost its italics, and the italics are really important.
Oh, okay.
All right, so the Bodhisattva of compassion. That is actually January 22nd, 2014.
Yeah, the one we have is February 17th, 2020.
Yes, that's the one to use.
Okay, you want me to find the newer one?
Yeah, because that's 6 years old.
Shoto, it's actually a part of the Heart Sutra with commentary that you posted to the website.
Oh
It's
dear,
been-
yes. But the thing is, I titled it on the website.
Yeah.
And I didn't make it accessible on the website. Come on, come on, come on, come on.
Well, I printed it from the website, so
All right, if folks have it, we'll work with it. Okay, that's really what's important.
So just this first paragraph, before looking at your notes, is the basic realization of the Buddha that the 5 skandhas are empty. And then what you do with that depends upon whether you're Theravadan or Mahayanas, but it's the basic realization that every component of your being is empty.
Including the components.
Everything is empty, yeah.
Yeah.
Form, feeling, conception, perception, and consciousness, I think goes on and down in that. It's just all empty, but that is, I believe, the basic realization of the Buddha.
It is. It's the fundamental realization that there actually is no thingness. It also is fundamental realization, and this is expressed in the Avatamsaka, is the nature of existence is this integrated totality, which has no thingness in and of itself.
And I think it's in one of the Nikayas, Buddha says that, because it caught my attention, that we cling to existence.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah,
cling-
right. We do cling to existence. I can be persuaded not to cling to this, that, or the other, but yeah, I cling to existence.
Understood, and that's a fundamental existential experience, and that is key. And that is what is all the teachings, all the realizations are asking us to look into. That sense of existence, non-existence, all of those are things that we hold dear.
Luca, can I?
Unbounded does anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, I just have a question, Luca, about this. This is a more general question. So so one of the challenges it seems like that I have coming from my own philosophical background in the West is I tend to think ontologically. That's how I was trained to think in terms of beingness.
Yeah.
So the Heideggerian beingness question.
Yep.
And beingness, being, isn't a word that appears in the Heart Sutra in that sense. It's not even a category here. The skandhas are not beingness. The skandhas are kind of a functional emptiness. So I bring that up only to say that for me, it's been one of the challenges to let go of my orientation towards something we call beingness.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Absolutely. My college education is in philosophy, so I'm there.
How is the Buddha negating beingness?
Buddha is negating the idea of any solidity of being, that things neither are nor are not. If you asked, did the Buddha negate being, he would have been silent.
Yeah.
So,
Because you're saying in awareness, so awareness may be close to beingness. It's not one of the categories of awareness, but here it is. Well, the Bodhisattva is in awareness, so what is that?
well,
I do speak about that in the commentary.
Yeah.
All right.
I wanted
And
to,
I'll get to that, but I want at this point before we go
Oh,
further down the lines, there's usually in the beginning of the Heart Sutra, it says, Avalok deep in deep, prajna paramita or deep meditation, however it is phrased, he is doing something. All right, but who is Avalokiteshvara? Avalokiteshvara is the bodhisattva of compassion. And what is compassion doing in emptiness? What is the relationship? And almost all of the Heart Sutras do not explain who the bodhisattva, who Avalokiteshvara is. And so that sense of this mystical being realizing emptiness separates emptiness from compassion. So I understood that this is about the realization of emptiness, the realization of non-thingness, the realization of the interconnectedness of all unfolding. It's not being, but all unfolding. And the realization that this unfolding is me and is everything else. And the engaging of this unfolding is the compassionate mind of offering. And that is the expression of Avalokiteshvara. And the image of Avalokiteshvara. It's 100,000 arms and hands. Each hand has a tool, and each hand also has an eye. So each hand both sees and offers help.
I want to back you up. It's like,
Yeah.
I want to take a little more time on something, and now I have to recall it. Avalokiteshvara, compassion in emptiness. I mean, you were talking about the relationship between those two. And it was just before you went to the image of who Avalokiteshvara is. And I was thinking, you have probably read that kind of preamble to the Heart Sutra where it gives you the setting.
Yeah.
Who he was talking to and stuff like that. And wasn't he talking to his mother? He was talking to some.
Oh, well, in some of the longer versions, I mean, first of all, in the longer versions, a lot of people and beings and demons and all, everybody comes to visit.
Sure.
But in a kind of shorter version, the Buddha is talking with not his mother, but with he's talking with Shariputra.
Shariputra, that's who it is. So I don't know where the mother came in there. But so Shariputra has, I think, already died, or maybe he hasn't. I don't know.
Well, Shariputra is the fall guy for a lot of Theravadan.
Right. Yeah, we took him out of here.
He always gets emptiness explained to him.
Right. Yes.
And so he's actually quite charming in many of the sutras. Because he almost gets there, and then Manjushri has to come and straighten him out, and this person has to come and straighten him out, and in the I forgot it. I'm drawing a blank on the title, but so often he's just like, I almost understand.
Okay. This is interesting because I have some images of Shariputra, but I don't have that item. But again, I'm going, okay, so I'm not going to be the one who does this academic study, but there was something in between compassion and emptiness that I really wanted to catch. And of course, you don't have notes, so you can't go back in your notes and figure
Who,
out.
me?
You, yeah. Or maybe you do have notes.
What, in things that we spoke about?
Things, yeah, the conversation we just had. It's like, now I'm trying to remember this. I really wanted to ask you about it, and I cannot remember a thing.
All right, so it'll come back to you. All right, don't forget, it's not a thing.
I hope
It
so.
arises and diminishes. It's the same process. It goes on. Don't try and hold on to it. Don't.
System on my lap. It did eventually come back.
It will eventually come back. So let it arise when it wants to arise. So compassion and emptiness are integrally related. All right, and it's often not examined, but it is absolutely central to the realization of things not having thingness, but being interconnected. It's that net of Indra. When things disappear as things, they're still arising. They're still unfolding. Well, what is going on that is this arising? How do things arise? They arise by engaging. They arise by mutually offering. If you have a glass and you fill it with wine, all right, the glass offers its glassness to the wine to hold it, and that process creates a reality. And so the totality of existence is offering itself to existence. Avalokiteshvara, with the 100,000 arms, is the wine glass. It's your hand, it's the wine, it's the table. All of these are offering themselves to existence. They're offering their existence to each other. This is the unfolding process that is reality. That is the underlying nature of reality.
Does this mean that when we chant the Heart Sutra, and particularly this form of the Heart Sutra where Shariputra is, that place in the chanting is taken by our name, you know, Ho,
Yeah.
Don, Ho, Luca, Ho, Shoto, that it's possible for us to become joined in the realization of Avalokiteshvara.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
we actually have some volition in joining this dance and becoming this. Is that going out too far?
No, it's not. The entire intention, not just of my work, but of the Heart Sutra itself. And that is one of the things that I struggled against in the various forms, because the various forms teach a text, and we should study the text, the meaning of the text. And no, it's beseeching all the chanters to realize.
It's an action word.
Yes, to realize the Heart Sutra. Shoto.
So here's another piece that I want to slow down. And it's the arising by offering. And now, whether it was existence arises by offering, or whether it was compassion arises, or I think it's everything arises in the mutual offering. I just want to pause there. It's like everything arises by things offering to each other.
Yes.
And as I see it, things offer to each other. Well, first they witness, they see each other. I think they speak each other into existence. That's probably a metaphor.
All right, but it doesn't go along with the Avatamsaka.
What?
In the Avatamsaka, it says it in about 4 or 5 places. They engage, but they do not know each other.
They engage, but they do not. Can you say more about that?
Knowing is to create an idea, to create an entity.
Okay,
All right.
sure.
So the dharmas in the Avantamsaka, I mean, when it's so short a phrase, they do not know each other. It just brought me to a halt. Yes, they engage, but they do not see a thing. Dharmas engage in mutual offering without seeing self, selfness, or an entity. And it's not that there isn't an entity, it's just they do not see, they do not make a thing.
Okay, so we're really in quantum mechanics here. So,
Actually,
there are a couple of things that I've done that I felt I was made to do. You know, it's like, oh, you want me to do that? Okay. Like walking across the Great Plains. And there are things, and there are times when I think, okay, I'm going to this place or that place. And some of those places are here and some of them are like in the Black Hills and so forth. It's like I go and allow a thing to see me and I allow it to make me.
All right, but this is the process of the mind.
Right. That's what I think. That's my language for something that I think is happening.
Right.
So
yeah, and that is the process of the mind that the Heart Sutra asks one to question.
Yeah. So please go some more with that.
Well, as I was saying earlier, we create realities. We create an idea, whether it's an idea that it bubbles up from within us, or it's something that we experience from the outside and we make correlations. But that is the process of the skandhas, and so we create realities. And so whatever idea that we actually experience arises in that process. And that's why in the practice of sitting, those ideas, whatever they are, they come, they have strength at certain points, and they disappear. It's like, what is going on? They don't have a solid reality. But if we conceive of them as having a solid reality, we will then act. And that action has consequences. And that's what the Buddha said in terms of karma. Because what you think drives what you act, how you act, and that action has consequences. That is the action that creates reality. Brad, you had a question in there?
Well, a couple of two things really. One is the way I have articulated this to myself is that reality is relational.
Yeah.
And that there's nothing but relationality. And I remembered that because of what you said, Shoto, a moment ago at the level of quantum mechanics. There is nothing but connection.
Nothing but relationship. Yes.
It's relationship.
Yeah.
And then within that, so in my own experience, this is just how I feel my way into this, is that again, I always reference my Zazen, just that's the only reference point I have. In Zazen, there can be a feeling of softness with just what is happening. That's the closest that I can get to understanding the relationship between compassion and emptiness, because and compassion itself is empty. So sometimes I like to, what I sometimes do is I reify the virtues and I make them permanent. and I make the non-virtuous things impermanent because I want them to go away.
Welcome to being a sentient being.
So I always have to remember that this arising of compassion is an arising of compassion. There's not something there
Yep.
that is compassion. It's arising in that what's happening, it arises.
Yep.
I wanted to make a point that's maybe less intellectual and more experiential and present. And that is, I'm going through incident in my life that produces a lot of grief and loss. So I saw a therapist who obviously, she was recommending compassion meditations, guided meditations on compassion. So this morning I asked Brad, well, what's the relationship between dealing with this grief and self-compassion, because I didn't really get it. And so that comes up for me now, is that what is the relationship between compassion and letting go of the 5 skandhas? And the only experience I've had that of today is that I did a guided meditation on self-compassion. And you see that when you're compassionate for yourself, this certain joy arises.
Yes.
So I'm not sure this is on point, but exactly with what we're talking about. But to be less of a technical view of compassion is, what is compassion? Why are they using the word compassion in this? It's obviously, I mean, compassion is a big Buddhist deal, right?
Well, the reason that it's in there is because experientially they arise together. The realization of emptiness and compassion arise together. And there are practices that are nurturing that awareness. The more solidly we hold on to something, the more solidly we create something, the less compassionate we can be.
Mm-hmm.
If we hold something gently, if we hold even a difficult experience gently, we can feel compassion for that process, compassion for ourselves. That compassion, the more we hold on to something, the less compassion we can experience.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? And so we're holding on to ourselves, our 5 skandhas, and there's no compassion in that.
Right. I mean, you know, Donald Trump is the prime example of someone who will hold on to even a lie and absolutely is incapable of compassion. Shut up.
A time check. I may have said that we had until 8 o'clock Central Time, and that was not true.
Oh,
We gave ourselves 2
That's-
hours, which means,
I was wondering about that.
yeah, it means and I have no idea why I said that, but I'm looking at this and I'm going, so we have 7 minutes left.
Right.
And this could go on all night. It's fabulous.
Well, you know, it's an offering, and I think we have a conversation going.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's just, you know, the sense of my connection to the Heart Sutra. I'm not teaching it academically. I'm not studying it. I'm not offering it in an academic or intellectual way, although the ideas are profound and can be seen philosophically, but it is experiential. And so I think you have a sense of that coming out of me. At least I hope that is the case.
Yeah.
Let's just do the first line. And, you know, it says unfolding arises integrally. I think we covered that. And the term within, all right, on the one that's on the screen, it's italicized. And within, remember I was describing about meditating from, the multitude of things and then going into non-thingness, and then coming out with a word or a phrase, which again is another thing. That process, that henzan that Dogen is talking about, is that within. And so throughout this commentary, and on the back of the commentary is something I wrote quite a while ago, in basically one shot, but the term within is central to that. And you'll see within sprinkled throughout the commentary. And so please pay attention to that, because within does not mean location. Within does not mean from here to there. Within is not a place. And so within, is a preposition. I think it's called a preposition, which indicates location. And within is far deeper and far more profound than that. So take that word, and I'm offering you do what I did with that. Meditate on it until it disappears. Mm-hmm. Until you no longer see a thing, no longer see a location. What does within mean? And so there are many words in what I've written here which could be meditated on themselves. Because what I've written in this explanation is the experience arising out of the meditations. It's not an intellectual explanation of why I did this and that. What I wrote down there is what I saw, is what I understood within those words, within those meditative experiences. And so when I say unbounded compassion, those very terms, unbounded compassion, not just compassion, but unbounded. Unbounded means no definitions, no borders. What is that unbounded? And when I say it arises integrally, it doesn't rise causally, it rises at the same time. It is integral to the realization of emptiness. So compassion and emptiness are simultaneous. So up front, Bodhisattva of compassion identifies the manifesting, and ing in manifesting. I put that in there. That actually isn't a word because it's manifestation, and I kept on getting kicked back by Microsoft until I said, no, learn it. But it's manifesting because it is a process. It's an unfolding process. All right. And Brad, as you were saying, it's like it's this integral unfolding, quantum unfolding within the realization. Bodhisattva of compassion identifies the manifesting of the compassionate mind. The compassionate mind, is it a person? Is mind a thing? It's not. I have problems with what I wrote there saying compassionate mind. And I wish I could do it in a better way. But Avalokiteshvara is the manifesting of compassion, manifesting as an ongoing process. So Avalokiteshvara is not a thing. So it identifies the manifesting, the ongoing manifesting of the compassionate mind with the realization of emptiness as explicated in the sutra. And then I have some smaller notes which make references. And further on, I explore what mind means. And that's in verse, I think, 6. But verse 6 is something that is really enormous in and of itself. So, first line is is a place to begin with. Unbounded compassion arises integrally within the realization, not as a result of, within the realization of emptiness. Brad, I have a question for you. Has Shoto ever shown you my triangle of existence?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
All right. Now, I because what you've been talking about is what I've been, what came out of the Heart Sutra and what was also part of the Heart Sutra, that realization. And so it also came out of woodworking. And so it's got a story in and of itself. So Shoto, would you forward that on to everybody?
Yeah, and what I think I want to do is I want to add it to the website, and then I'll give you the website link again. So I'll put the triangle, this explanation up there, and I don't know if there's anything else. Okay, and then I'm going to make a way that people can access that page, because right now you have to know what the link is, but I'm sure I can fix that.
Yeah.
Would people like this recording to be up there? I'm like really excited about the conversation we're having.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
All right.
on the one hand, I want to publish this. On the other hand, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And this is the first time I've ever spoken to anybody on this and actually had them listen.
Mhm.
Because usually I get my head handed to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I totally appreciate what has been, what you have offered. And by the way, that's the offering of existence. That is the compassionate offering of existence, to be present.
And we are good. We're still recording. Okay. No, I'm
right.
really pleased. This is amazing. I've heard amazing things from everybody who has said anything. And we'll be back the second Sunday in September.
Yeah.
What's the date for that next class?
Um,
Maybe I can find it.
13th.
13th?
13th, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
5 to 7. See, we changed the time. That's why I have difficulty. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.